Whoopsies.
Hi, Beverly.
Hello, hello. I think I joined a little too early. It gave me a notification that it started.
Oh, it's totally fine. You're only 3 minutes early. How are you?
I'm pretty good, and you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there is. And I think there is just a lot of negativity going on in the world. But as long as we try to, stay positive,
Yeah.
that's all we can
Yeah.
do. And help
It's
people
true.
when we can.
It's true. I appreciate that lens.
Yeah.
What are you up to these days? Where are you still over in Western Maine?
Yeah, I still live in Bridgeton.
Bridgeton.
I've been
Right.
doing really good. I just recently had my daughter Lily in August, and it's been really good.
Nice.
She's 13 pounds now. She is a big baby.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Leah. I appreciate that.
That's so cool. Wow. What great news. Hi, Donna.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
So how's it been going with her, Beverly, with the new baby?
Oh, she's doing amazing. She is a spitting image of me. Spitting
Yeah.
image. Looks just like me, but in general, she's just such a beautiful baby. It's good to have babies sometimes. It's just a weird
Yeah.
period, because working and having
Yeah.
babies is so weird. But yeah, she's been great. Sometime I'll have to share
Yeah.
you a photo.
I'd love to see it.
I'll send you one sometime.
Oh, and I apologize ahead of time. I have to head out by 4 to get to an appointment. So.
Okay, no problem, Donna. Hi, Emily. Welcome.
Hi. Before we get rolling, I'm gonna try my very best. I'm super psyched to be here. I'm sorry we always get crowded around this time. I'm gonna try my best to stay. But we got about 40-ish kids out there right now, so we'll see how they fare.
Yep, I get it. I know this is a terrible time for you all, that this is your busiest time of day. So thanks for even being here. Appreciate it. All right. Hi, Molly. Welcome. Hi, Deb, Jess, Hannah, Allie, Zach. This is great. Happy Tuesday, everybody. So we're going to wait just a few more moments as everybody filters in. What's that? Hi, Signe. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Good, hanging in there. I like your Youth Hope Month logo.
Yeah, doing the little things.
Yes, that's what we've got.
Small reminder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. So I think that folks are going to continue to trickle in, but we have a full agenda today. And I know that some folks need to pop off early, so we can go on and get started. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I know that Tuesday afternoons are really not the most convenient time to zoom out of the daily chaos that I think that we all live in our own ways, and talk bigger picture about systems level work around youth homelessness in Maine. So thank you for taking the time to do this. I think this continues to be a really important space for folks. So this is the November Homeless Youth Provider Group meeting in the state of Maine. our plan today is to start the meeting the way we always do. We're going to hear a little bit from the YAB, the Statewide Youth Action Board. We're going to give an opportunity for program updates and announcements. And then really the brunt of our conversation today is going to be focused around housing resources for youth in Maine. And so various folks on the call today are actually going to speak to the work that they're doing in various parts of Maine. And then there will be an opportunity just to ask some questions and really collaborate and learn more about what's happening in the different corners of our vast state around different housing resources for young people. But before we do that, I'd love to welcome Beverly Hubbard, who's the Statewide Youth Action Board Specialist, and turn it over to her for our meeting agreements and any updates from the Statewide Youth Action Board. Welcome, Beverly.
Thank you so much, Leah. Let me do this for a real quick second so you can all see me. And our meeting agreements are as follows. Nothing about us without us. If you use acronyms, please define what they mean. If you take space, please make space for others. Don't yuck a yum. Do not minimize anyone else's experiences or expertise that is related in a subject matter that you do not quite understand. Everyone else's point of view of something is completely different. Whoops, I read that too quick. It's okay. Be conscious of youth voices. They are experts. They are experts on youth work. Please build a mutual understanding of partners' missions. Understand that all systems are coming to the table under-resourced and overburdened. We are all here in it together to boost each other. Ask questions about how your role fits. Listen to understand, not to respond, and prioritize accessibility for all. And also, so I have a quick little update, but it's a fun one. So recently, the Youth Action Board went over the Youth Addendum. So far, we have no changes to be made for the point and time count. The Youth Addendum point in time count, the Youth Addendum point in time count survey used every year. I believe it's January of 2026 that is being done. So far, the YAB will be an editation of the Youth Coordinated Entry System training because I got an email from Joe asking if we can kind of edit that. Next thing on our update is recently the Youth Action Board attended a Teen Youth Library Summit for 2025. We attended it on the 14th from 2:45 to 3:50. To 3:55. I read that wrong, sorry. And the host of this was Julie Winkelstein. She is a librarian and activist. She was a wonderful person. Somebody that Sydney Lynch kind of forwarded an email to me regarding that. And I appreciate you so much, Sydney, for sending me that email about that. I took some notes about it and really appreciated it. So did YAB members. And so far, that's all I have for updates. Thank you so much for letting me give the updates and do the meeting agreements, and I'll pass it back to Leah. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Beverly. Appreciate you. And always appreciate the way you put the meeting agreements in the chat as well. And speaking of the chat, we have a nice large group with some new faces today. And so if folks don't mind putting in the chat your name, your pronouns, and what agency you're affiliated with, really helpful. My name is Leah McDonald. I use she, her pronouns. I work at Preble Street, and I'm one of the co-chairs of this committee. The other co-chair, Allison Small, who works for Community Care, couldn't make it today. So it's just me. So this next part of the agenda is an opportunity for anybody on this call to give updates or announcements about what's going on in your corner of the state. Before we do that, I wanted to start with a larger announcement about federal funding, which is something that this group, we've all been talking about for the past several months since we reconvened in September. Obviously, we all know that there is a pretty extensive level of uncertainty and chaos at the federal level, which is trickling down to impact the clients that we serve, the work that we do, and our everyday lives. So, so there are two primary federal funders for shelter, housing, and outreach services in the state of Maine. The first one is through the federal DHHS, through a department called the Family and Youth Services Bureau, or FYSB. And these are funds that are dispensed through the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. In the state of Maine, there are 4 runaway and homeless youth federally funded programs that are funded in agencies throughout the state. So we have transitional living programs, which funds housing. We have basic center programs, which funds shelters for youth ages 18 and under. We have maternity group homes, which is essentially a transitional living program for pregnant and parenting youth. And then we've always had street outreach programs. FYSB is a funder that provides an opportunity to apply for funding annually. This has been longstanding. Those of us in the space who have received FYSB funding have known it to be a pretty reliable and stable source of funding. This past spring, which is when the opportunities to apply for these grants came up, as with so many others, the grant opportunity did not arrive. And so we waited throughout the spring and into the summer for the grant opportunity to arrive, hoping that it would, not knowing for sure whether it would ever drop. And then it did drop in July with a 2-week turnaround time, and with the fairly shocking information that FYSB had decided to essentially eliminate the standalone street outreach program for runaway and homeless youth and combine that with the other 3 programs. So it increased the total amount that you could apply for with those other 3 programs, but the street outreach program in and of itself as a standalone program was effectively defunded. We had a 2-week turnaround time in July with very little notice to write grants. I know, again, several of the folks in this room did that. And then the grant notifications were somewhat delayed. So FYSB grants always start at the beginning of the governmental fiscal year, which is October 1st. It's not unusual to not find out about funding until the end of September, which can be very stressful for programs. And unfortunately, as most of you recall, that is right around the time that the government shut down. And so some people heard word about their FYSB awards and other people did not before the government shut down. And then when the government reopened, these awards have been slowly trickling out. So I'm actually not entirely sure where we stand in the state right now in terms of awards that were applied for and received. I do know, working for Preble Street, we were fortunate. We applied for a maternity group home award and we did receive it. We had a street outreach program grant that was expiring, and so we didn't have the opportunity to reapply for that grant. But because they were combined, we did get additional funding within the maternity group home award that allows us to keep our street outreach program alive. So I certainly don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if anybody wants to share whether or not their agency applied for that funding and if they've heard word before, it's always helpful to know what's going on in the state with this funding. So I'll pause there because I want to move on to HUD funding. But if anybody wants to say anything or have any questions about the DHHS FYSB funding, we can talk about that.
There we go. I had to find the right microphone button. Yeah, so here at the Northern Lighthouse, we, like you said, we waited. Our TLP funding expired the end of September. We had our application in, assumed that our funding would be approved, but we did hear late last week that we were not approved for TLP funding. Therefore, our TLP is closing in by the 28th, if not earlier. We are on borrowed money right now that we don't even really have to borrow, so we are closing. It is a smaller program and a newer program being here up north, but it's sad for us. We're doing great things. We've got 2 that within the next 2 weeks we're really trying to get pushed to get their adult ed education done because they're so close. We've got 2 that are in driver's ed that we're trying to work with the educators to make sure that they can get all their driving hours in before they have to move on somewhere else. We've got, people that are employed that have jobs that are having to, be uprooted. So it is devastating. We always knew that it was a possibility, but it was kind of like no, this won't happen. Like, we're doing great things. From what I hear, our application had very high scores. Don't know exactly what that means. I'm not in the grant writing process or that whole side of things. But it was just a funding decision. It just came down to dollars. So our TLP will be closing by the last day will be the 28th. If we make it that long, if we can place kids before then we will be closed before then. So our BCP funding is on a different cycle. So we still do have our emergency shelter open. Some of the youth from the TLP will be moving over, those that are under 18 and that don't have anywhere to go. We're going to continue to work with them for a little bit. That's kind of where we're at right now, scrambling, trying to figure out what we're going to do with thank goodness the company we work for is trying to put staffing and give everybody a role in different departments, doing different things, but it's difficult here right now, to say the least.
I'm so sorry to hear it, Jess. I think our hearts are all with you all up there. How many youth are currently housed at your TLP?
So we have 5 currently. We had 6 beds open. We were kind of waiting to fill that last one in case something like this did happen. We have 1 who was looking to move out on Friday anyway, which left us with 4 who really needed a place to go. We have 1 who is over 18. We're scrambling right now. We're working with Community Cares with some mobile diversion funds, trying to see if there's any way we can get him into an apartment in the next 2 weeks. And then the others, I believe, are going to move over into our shelter, and we're going to bend some rules there a little bit in keeping them longer than what our BSBY funding allows for. So.
Danielle, did I see that your hand went up?
Yeah, so I'm sorry to hear that, Jess. We also did not get our funding back over at Midcoast, at least for what I'm doing right now. So I don't even know what that looks like as far as the position, because we had like the kind of the money to get people where they needed to go. So I think it's going to be rather difficult next year. Like, I mean, we did good with what we had, so I am glad for that. But we didn't receive it either. So we have this last little bit that that we're getting, and then we have to figure out how to, just how to kind of stretch that and, wrap up well, I guess. I guess this is where we're at. So I'm not sure what else we're doing exactly. I think the director is applying for some more grants, but it's going to be tight for a lot of folks. So I don't know.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Danielle. Had you all applied for the Transitional Living Program grant, or which grant?
I am not the grant person. I just know that whatever grant that we applied to do, We did not get it again.
Okay.
So, I'm quite sure it's mixed in with whatever, whatever's happening right now with
Yeah.
whatever the Mary Meeting Collaborative. It's a very long name. So, but it had to do with, well, at least with Maine State housing funding that we did not receive.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And could I just ask a clarifying question, Danielle? Is this related to are you the housing navigator for the Mid-Coast, like preventing student homelessness? Is this?
I think we're part of that. From my understanding how things went, we have a collaborative. And so I liaison with Brunswick, somebody liaison with Richmond, and RSU1. So I'm kind of like housing navigation for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the Maine housing. This is Donna. That was our Maine housing pilot program. So we didn't get renewed for that, but I think that we are going to apply for the continuum of care, the youth homeless demonstration program grants, and some other grants to kind of fill some gaps. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And just to clarify, that grant specifically, it was made into a permanent program similar to the program that the Maine Department of Education was operating. It's just that Maine Housing's was set at that continuation
Right.
of $2 million a year, and then they cut it to $125,000. So it's just a lack of state funding.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there wasn't even an application.
Got it. Jennifer, I see your hand up too.
Yeah, I know for New Beginnings, we were not in part of this renewal process and having to apply. So currently our grants are still active. So like our BCP goes until September of 2000. Well, it looks like 2027, and the TLPs and the SOP are both with 2027. So we didn't have to apply this round, but we will have to go through that the next round.
Yeah. So some really mixed and hard news, it sounds like, across the state. And I'm just sorry to say that the next thing that I want to talk about is not better news. So the other significant federal funder in the state of Maine for youth homelessness prevention is HUD, the federal HUD department, through what's called the COC, or the Continuum of Care. And many of you in this room remember that several years ago, back in 2021, our COC received Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project funding, otherwise known as YHDP. That was money that was set aside by HUD specifically for youth prevention of homelessness, prevention of youth homelessness. And we received at that time, so we received the bucket of money for Maine, which was a big deal. And then we were able to figure out as a community what we wanted to spend that money on, put out the opportunity for different agencies to apply. And then we ended up awarding, I think, 5 different projects, different YHDP grants that have been in play since then.
So I really don't want to fucking hear it.
Up until now, the YHDP grants, we've had to renew them every year, but they haven't been what's called competitive. And so it's been fairly certain, as long as programs are complying and meeting the expectations, that funding will remain. The COC, and I'm going to try really hard to keep this simple, but it's really complicated. And so forgive me in advance if this is confusing. And I'm not even, frankly, totally sure that I get it. But HUD, as a federal agency, distributes all of its homeless dollars throughout the United States through COCs, through Continuum of Cares. And some states have a bunch of Continuum of Cares, like multiple COCs in one city. But then some states, like Maine, has one big statewide COC. So all of the money that Maine gets from HUD for homelessness goes through the COC, and that's to the tune of about $22 million. The YHDP funding that we get is, I think it's like $1.6 million. And that has always been a carve out specifically for youth homelessness. Now, similar to the FISBE grants that we were just talking about, the COC NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, typically comes out at the end of summer. Actually, it usually comes out sometime in early summer, and then we have to apply by the end of summer, and then we receive notification of award around this time of year or earlier. Just like everything else, it was delayed and delayed and delayed. Then the government shut down. The government shutdown lasted a very long time, as we're all aware. During the time that the government was shut down, a lot of rumors started coming out. A lot of insider articles started coming out about what might be in this NOFO. And it indicated that the NOFO is going to look very different from how it has in the past. In other words, the way HUD is distributing money and prioritizing funding for homeless services is going to look dramatically different from how it typically has looked across the country. Then the government opened back up, and last Friday, the NOFO dropped. And unfortunately, many of the things that we feared, that we were concerned about in this NOFO, is true. And so, there are a lot of articles out there about it. I'm not going to try and repeat all of the ways in which this NOFO is harmful and goes against evidence-based practices for the work that we do in serving the homeless population. But what's important for us as a group of youth providers to know is that in Maine, for the first time, the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project funding is competitive. And basically what that means is that it is no longer guaranteed that Maine is going to have that $1.6 million that we have had for those 5 projects preserved for youth projects. It's going to have to be scored against all of the other projects, and it's going to have to be scored within this new framework that we're all trying to understand. It's basically a new algorithm for how projects are funding. We don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know what this means. Again, this just came out on Friday, so I think a lot of people are scurrying and trying to figure out what's happening. What does this mean for Maine? What does this mean for our agencies and our individual programs? But I think it's important for this group to understand that it's going to likely look different. And one of the ways that it's going to look different is that HUD is prioritizing supportive services and transitional housing over interventions like rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. So those projects that have rapid rehousing for youth are likely going to have to pivot. I know that we hold one of those grants. I know that Shaw House or Community Care holds one of those grants. So these are all just things to be aware of. And I heard one of you say that you're interested in applying for YHDP funding moving forward. And I think that's great. New projects are really important. And it's going to be very important to understand what the NOFO is and what the new requirements from HUD are. So I feel like I'm being a real naysayer and a downer here in saying all of this, but I want to be transparent with the group. Many of you probably already know everything that I'm saying, and I welcome anybody to contribute anything further in terms of what you've heard in your corner about this. Have folks been hearing about the NOFO? Or is this the first time that people are hearing about this?
Ms. Leah, just jumping in here on the Homeworthy front, I admittedly have been far more connected to the programs on the COC part that's a little bit more geared towards adult world and the permanent supportive housing and the massive cap to how much of the COC dollars can go towards that, which simply put is if followed through with will defund 1,200 tenants that are currently receiving subsidies on in permanent supportive housing. So that's been a little bit closer. I really, really appreciate your explanation around the YHDP pieces, and just really disappointing to know that there's a short timeline and a whole lot of government nomenclature to have to sort of understand, all the while we are caring for these young people who have really great needs. And so yeah, any cliff notes that you can send our way, we really appreciate.
So, okay. Well, I will put the link to two webinars into the chat. One is by the NAEH, or National Alliance to End Homelessness. And they are hosting a webinar, I think tomorrow, on understanding the NOFO. So that's going to be the NOFO in general. So like you were saying, you know, adults, the cap on permanent supportive housing, which is devastating for homelessness in general in this country. But if you're interested in a more youth-specific webinar, National Network for Youth is also hosting a webinar. You do have to be a member in order to attend this webinar, but I think we're at a moment where joining these might be a good thing as members. National Network for Youth is doing an incredible job of advocating and keeping tabs on what's happening in the country and in the federal funding realm. So I didn't put a link in for this because you actually have to be a member in order to get the link, but you can join as a member if you aren't already, or you can register directly for that webinar. And so that National Network for Youth one, when is that? Kirsten, do you remember? Thursday? Oh, sorry.
It's the 24th. It's
Thank
next
you.
Monday is the webinar specifically about this.
Great. National Network for Youth, unpacking the joint COC and YHDP NOFO. Oh, that's a lot of acronyms.
What are we doing with these?
Okay, and thank you, Signe, for attaching the statement from the Maine COC on all of this that came out yesterday. There was a big press conference.
And the other thing I was going to share, if you aren't a member of the National Network for Youth, they are doing on Thursday or the 20th of this week.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing a free one for everyone with Schoolhouse Connection and National Network for Youth. And that is just general federal policy update across the board for youth experiencing homelessness. So I'll put that in the chat too.
Thank you, Signe. I think that was the one I was thinking about, and I had forgotten to mention that one, so appreciate that. Definitely encourage you all to either attend these webinars or forward these to leadership at your agency to attend. It is critically important that we all are aware of what's happening. Things are moving really fast. And we're at a very vulnerable moment in Maine in the world of youth homelessness and the federal funding landscape. So the more we can all be collectively informed and share that information with one another, the more likely it is that we'll be able to preserve some of this funding. Okay, well, that was a pile of really bad news. So I'm hoping that for the rest of our program update or announcement section, there's some good news or signs of hope that folks can share before we move into our housing panel conversation. I'll turn it over to any of you.
There's still going to need to be more shit taken out of there.
Don't be shy. There's got to be some good stuff happening.
Go in the freezer too. This goes in the fridge.
I'm going to take an easy one that Emily just texted me. We're pinch hitting a little bit for Joseph Huffnagel today as he's busy today, but Emily just texted and said, well, through these like dark clouds, there are 30 to 40 kids out in the drop-in center right now with a retired therapist teaching ukulele and TLP doing some great mentoring. So just a real live, what's behind the Zoom screen right now is that the young people of the Mid-Coast and all over the state with the screen are still getting served. So there's just some real-time update, but on the front of the landing place, our transitional living units continue to be a real source of hope. And, you know, I'm going to share this just because of this time with funding. This organization chose to enter this program through philanthropy and have not yet tied ourselves to any federal or state funding, although the long haul and the expansion would really require that. but we are also feeling somewhat insulated by having jump-started this with philanthropic dollars, but our ability to sort of see the future and expand that is really limited in terms of the political landscape. And so it's discouraging and also just grateful in this moment that there's not more of a risk right now. And knowing full well that there is not a sustainable model on philanthropy alone. And so I think I would just say that, but the wait list for this program continues to grow. It's 4 units, and we have over 20 young people waiting in the wings to be able to utilize these apartments. And drop-in center continues to ramp up pretty exponentially, particularly as the days get a little bit colder. And we're finding that our no barrier resources are going really fast right now. I think that families and individuals are supplementing the cost of living with anything that we can access, whether that's clothing or toilet paper and paper towels and essential needs. And so there's a little bit more investment going into just basic supplies. And that's not necessarily to more individuals, but more of these products are going out. And I think, we're assuming that story is just that it's just a little bit harder to get by from week to week right now, and continue to really fight the housing slog as a whole community. So.
I can share an update. Hi everyone, I'm from Preble Street. As Leah shared earlier, we were awarded the maternity group home grant back in October. So it started October 1st, and we have been working hard to build up the program and get resources and everything that we need and get the curriculum and really understand what we're doing and how to serve pregnant and parenting youth. And we have our very first participant moving in on December 1st, and she is actively pregnant and due any day now. And so we're really starting off this whole journey strong. We're going to see the whole process through. Her and her partner are both moving in into our 2-bedroom unit, and they will have their baby and have a place to return to when they're out of the hospital. And so we're super excited for that and just really grateful for the opportunity to work with this population and see how we can better support youth that are pregnant and parenting.
Phew, those were some lovely signs of hope. Thank you all. We needed that. So we're going to pivot, and we're going to spend, I think, the rest of our time together today talking about housing in Maine for youth who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And so we've invited a couple of folks who are running housing programs to talk about their experiences and what their specific programs look like. And then I've got a couple of questions for those folks. And then I want to open it up just as a Q&A. My hope out of this conversation is that we can use it as an opportunity to collaborate, learn about what's happening in the different parts of the state. Already hearing that the Northern Lighthouse is working with community care, to make sure that the folks who are living in their TLP have a safe place to go is beautiful, and that's really indicative of the kind of collaboration that I think we all want to encourage in the state. So to kick us off, I have a question for you all that I'm hoping you could put answers into the chat for. And that question is, when you talk to the youth that you're working with, what do you hear from them are the biggest challenges to finding and maintaining housing? What are you hearing from young people? And feel free to go on and throw your answers into the chat.
Wasn't good. Baby. That land wasn't good.
All right. So
So I got the B.
Affordable housing and location. Access to food. Documentation, great. Lack of credit score. Housing for minors. Great. Rental history. Molly's acknowledging that this question tracks differently depending on the age of the youth. Under 18, struggles with other red tape. Supportive services, community connections, great. And not knowing where to even start. So as folks are talking about their programs, I would love to hear what you're doing, what are your housing programs, and also just a little bit about how you're addressing some of these challenges that have been acknowledged in the chat. So we've got 5 or 6 folks who I think are teed up to speak today. So we don't have a ton of time. So I'm hoping that you can each take maybe, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes to talk about your programs. I know that that's not a lot of time, but then I'm hoping to be able to have a little bit more of a robust conversation afterwards. So why don't we start with Hannah? I've got you first on the list from Preble Street, teen housing. Could you talk to us about the different housing opportunities for young people?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Hannah Osikis. I'm the Assistant Director of Teen Housing and Outreach at Preble Street. So we have a few different programs and we're funded a few different ways. So I'm going to start with our transitional living programs first. So we have 3 different transitional living programs. We have our FISB funded transitional living program, which serves youth 16 to 21 in Cumberland and York counties. We have our maternity group home. We're working on a new name for it. It is called Bisbee Maternity Group Home, but we are going to call it something else. So stay tuned for that. At the next meeting, we'll announce that. And that also serves youth 16 to 21 in Cumberland and York counties. And then we have a TLP that's funded through the Department of Corrections that serves youth at risk or currently involved with the juvenile justice system. And that's youth ages 16 to 24 in Cumberland and York counties. All 3 of those programs have the same requirements. We have a requirement that all youth must engage in education and or employment or income goal throughout their time in the program. And we ask that their meetings with their caseworkers happen at least 2 times a week at their unit. So the focus of that program, it's a year long, and it's really just focused on meeting their basic needs, but also teaching them independent living skills. So focusing on cooking, cleaning, how do you live independently? How do you live in the community? How do you reintegrate from Long Creek into the community? And really just building up those supports around you. And it's challenging. I think a lot of the things that came up on this list, we also face and are still trying to figure out how we navigate these things. We're really between us and the other TLPs, we're one of the only options for youth in the state for minors. And it's really hard to have to pick and choose between different youth of their circumstances. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we find is like, how do you compare these 2 youth that are both in an equal situation and prioritize one for housing and one for not, who has to either remain outside in a shelter in an unsafe situation. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we are stuck with and having to navigate daily. None of these TLPs are in the coordinated entry system, but we are talking about putting our FISB funded TLP into coordinated entry to kind of take that choice away and open it up to more youth throughout the state of Maine. We also have 2 YHDP funded programs. We have transitional housing and rapid rehousing. It is a joint component, but can be accessed independently. So if you do access transitional housing, you get the opportunity to access rapid rehousing, but you don't have to. So transitional housing is a 2 to 6 month long program. It's it's used as a short-term program where you can kind of get on your feet before going to your next step to avoid the shelter system. I think a really good example I like to use is like a youth can't afford their housing over the summer for college dorms, but they have fall housing secured. And so throughout those 2 months during the summer, they have nowhere to go and they would have to access the shelter. The goal would be is that they can access this transitional bed, get stabilized, work with a caseworker 3 times a week, and then move into housing in the fall, with all those things met during the summer and not having to access any other systems. And then we have rapid rehousing, which is up to 24 months, and it's really rental assistance. You're matched with a caseworker, you're working with them, you're on your own lease, which is the biggest difference. All the other programs are master lease units that Preble Street rents and pays full rent and utilities throughout the time you're in the program. But we support the youth in rapid rehousing in paying their own rent, their utilities, and really learning how to communicate with a landlord, navigating independent living and maintaining a job and paying all your bills and doing that for the first time. And we've seen a lot of success with having our clients in rapid rehousing. I think the biggest thing between transitional and rapid is that the time counts together. So if someone is in transitional housing for 6 months, they only have 24 minus 6. That math left. I'm not good at math. In rapid rehousing to build up to their full rent. So we try and move people out of transitional as fast as we can. Thanks, Leah. 18 months. So then they only have 18 months left in rapid. So we try and get, if you're in transitional, the day you move in, we're talking about what is your exit plan? Is it apartment searching? Is it returning the home? Is it college? What is your plan to get you out? So that way you have the max amount of time if you are entering rapid to build up to your rent, because we don't want someone to just build up in a month. That's unreasonable. I'm almost done. Our rapid rehousing, we can serve counties, Cumberland, York, Saginaw, and Oxford. And our transitional units are located in Portland. We have a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom right now. But our rapid rehousing, we're able to serve 2 more counties than Cumberland and York. I think that's the quick version.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. Anybody have any questions for Hannah right off the bat? Great. All right. Why don't we move on to Lexi from Community Care and Shaw House. Lexi, I think I saw you on the call.
Hi, I am. Can you hear me?
Hi, Lexi. Yes.
Hi.
Nice
Okay,
to see you.
perfect. I had to shut my camera off because connection got weird, so hopefully it works for this. And thank you for letting me follow Hannah, because we have similar programs to Preble Street, where we have the FISB TLP, and then the HUD transitional housing to rapid rehousing, and operate pretty similarly. So
I got rid of that.
we are the master leaseholders for the FISB TLP and the HUD transitional housing. For FISB TLP, we have 3 2-bedroom units, and then for HUD, we have 2 3-bedroom units, and they're actually all on the same street right next door to each other. So it kind of works well for folks that have moved out of the shelter and built community there. They're then in a different part of the overall community, but can see familiar faces. So that's been helpful. And then we also have the rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing, we cover Region 3, the DHS Region 3, so pretty much Penobscot North, and can have folks in Penobscot, Aroostook, Washington, Hancock, and Piscataquis counties. Right now we have folks in Presque Isle. There's about 5 slots up there, and then 10 in the Penobscot area. those just seem to be kind of the hubs of where people are and where people want to go. So if someone was looking for something on the coast in Hancock, we would just figure out how to make that work for them. And that same catchment range is for the HUD transitional housing. And then FISB is only in Penobscot. FISB is not through the coordinated entry process, but the other two are, and that has worked well to get folks in there. Different from Preble Street is our transitional housing is up to 24 months for folks that want to be in that program or need that whole time. There's no rental component for the transitional housing or the FISB TLP, and then rapid rehousing. Folks get the first 2 months of full rental assistance, and then it starts going up every 2 months from there. If something happens and someone's not able to pay the rent, that's okay. We can help them make sure that the relationship with the landlord stays strong, and then work on a plan to make sure they can resume paying. Yeah, I think that's a majority of it. If there are questions later, I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks, Lexi. Any immediate questions for Lexi? Okay, so up next I have New Beginnings. Denise, Zach, Deb, I don't know who is wanting to chat on behalf of New Beginnings, or maybe all three of you. I'd pass it off to you all.
If you want, I can do a quick blurb on shelter and then pass it to Denise and Zach because they do more of the transitional housing piece. So I am the shelter program coordinator. It's a 3-month program, so 90 days, which has expanded from the 21 days we were when I first started here 5 years ago, which allows us to have a little bit more stability for the young people. We get our referrals from all over, and usually what we're trying to do is either reunite young people with caregivers in their lives who can help take over the housing piece, or move them to our 18-month transitional living program if possible. And we have 12 beds, but we have a couple of those beds that have been approved as flex beds for night-to-night stays. So we do have an expectation while the young people are here that they attend school. If they've already graduated from school, that they be engaging in some kind of employment search. But some youth have a really hard time with that expectation. And so we do have some flex beds that are just overnight beds that can help kind of meet that gap for minors who need a place to go, but maybe can't really handle the expectation of the 24-hour care piece of our shelter. And I think that's pretty quick standard overview. If anybody has questions, feel free. Denise, you want to take TLP, CLP, and all that?
I don't know if Denise can hear you or not.
Sorry, I was not able to hear Deb at all. I could hear everybody else faintly, but I could not hear Deb, so I have no idea. But I can talk about our TLP program. Can people hear me okay? Okay. So our TLP program, we have a building in Lewiston for minors, 8 beds. We have 2 adult buildings in Lewiston, 18 to 21-year-olds. We have a DOC unit in Augusta, 2 beds. We have a single unit there in Augusta, in the same building, again for adults. Our drop-in program is working on a plan also for that building. Not really sure where that's at, so I'm not going to speak to that, but there is something in the works there. We have a building in Farmington with a unit for a single and a parenting unit. And our funding sources are same as everybody else, the FISB, the HUD, and DHS. I think I'll probably let Zach speak about the other programs that our youth are in.
Sure. So, so a couple of programs we have for, I guess, young adults, young people that are 18 and over. We have the Independent Living Apartment Program, which we call ILAP. And so that's really a collaboration with DHHS. And for, 18 and up, I think it's 18 to 23 if they've signed a B9 agreement, the extended care agreement, and have spent really just one day in foster care, then they're eligible. And so with that, they get referred by their DHS worker, and then we can essentially provide case management and additional sort of support in addition to what DHS is providing. And, it's 100% paid as far as housing goes. And as long as they are in school or employed, either or both, then they basically can stay on that extended care agreement and continue to receive, 100% housing coverage and additional case management services. And then we have the Home Art program, which is funded by a grant through the city of Lewiston. So it's kind of, it's a tenant-based rental assistance program. That funding is running until June of next year. Right now, I don't think we have approved for additional funding beyond that, but that can be used for anything sort of tenant-based. So a lot of times we will enroll people in that and provide case management and housing navigation and kind of get them housed in their own apartment with their name on their own lease. That runs, that support is up to 12 months. And then the agreement with that is, as long as they have employment that's been stable, at least to the time they're entering the program, they could pay, up to 50% of their rent to New Beginnings. And then we pay the landlord, independently of that. So they don't have to worry about that. But then with the case management component, we can kind of help them communicate with the landlord and get their utilities set up with CMP and handle some of those things if there's any issues with neighbors or anything like that. So the landlords we've worked with have kind of appreciated having that extra level of support for the young people we've housed through that. But it can also be, used for, to cover a security deposit or, background check fees, or, we all know how expensive it is to move into your own apartment. And for our young people, it's usually their first time kind of going through that process themselves, and they don't always realize that it's like, first months and sometimes last months and security deposit, and it costs a lot to get moved in. So sometimes they might not need the ongoing case management or monthly rental support, but just to have that ability to maybe get help with the security deposit and things like that to get moved in, we can use the Home Art program for that. That's it.
Nice. Thank you, New Beginnings, for the trifecta approach. That was really helpful and informative. So Jess, I have the Northern Lighthouse on the list next. I know you already said your piece about TLP, but I welcome whatever else you want to add.
Yeah, so like I said, everything is kind of shuffled right now with our TLP closing, but we have used the rapid rehousing through community care. They've helped us out. We've done mod housing through Maine housing, and we've had quite a few move on to college campus as well, are places that we've used. We still will have our shelter open. Our shelter is funded through FISB. So with the 4 beds that we have are funded through them. So it is supposed to be a 21-day max stay. we try to abide that as best we can, finding, you know, a safe place within the 21 days for youth to go. Sometimes it is longer than that, especially I just heard yesterday that Job Corps is opening applications back up again. So we all know that that's not going to happen in a 3-week turnaround. So we try to stay with that as well. And I can't really think, I guess, of anything else right now that we're offering. We're hoping that this TLP closure isn't permanent, but without the FISB support, it definitely will be difficult to be up and running again.
Great. Thank you for that update, Jess. And it's great to hear that the shelter is still going to be able to remain open. So next on the list, I have landing place or homeworthy for Molly or Emily. I know you have some ukulele happening in the background.
That's okay. I was gonna say, I think you're stuck with me because Emily just texted and said, sorry, I gotta go. So lots going on out there, but thanks, Leah. And I think where I want to start is to just say that sort of one of our Mid-Coast gaps is support for unaccompanied minors. It's an area that like we really just sort of struggle with. We piloted a overnight respite, which didn't get great utilization, but came at a great expense. So we continue to hold the DHHS license for that program with the hope that we can come up with a working model and maybe use a per diem model with our adult shelter staff. But we were not funded again under any particular program for this. But so that is a hopeful in our future that we recognize that it continues to be a need in our community, and there we really struggle with safe places for unaccompanied minors to be. That said, we also have a pretty high population of young people that still have some family connections. And so our family shelter is operational here, which is 22 beds. And within family units, more recently, we have supported young families at 18 plus in this shelter. And so young moms, young couples without children are eligible for our family shelter and young individuals. And so that's part of our programming. I will give a little bit of a plug to some shelter funding that's coming up in this session as I wrap up. But the other piece is case management. So case management is really our most accessible service line for unaccompanied minors. And we work we bill Maine Care for folks that do have Maine Care. Otherwise, we accept folks into this program regardless without any barriers. And we're working a lot with schools and interfacing. Most recently, Penn Bay is placing a community health worker in RSU 13. And so that will interface a lot with our case managers and try to create some catchment through the school pipelines. And these case managers have access to our full gamut of navigation services. And so that's where these young people are able to access our landlord relationships, and we run a targeted rapid rehousing program. It's not a COC program, but we run a targeted as long as it's funded through Maine housing, and we will see in the next couple months if that's continued. Similarly, we also have housing problem solving through our navigation programs, and again, we have that as long as it continues to be funded, which is we should know more in December. Housing problem solving is similar to what some of you all described around some prevention, eviction prevention. So we're able to work with families prior to an eviction taking place and trying to salvage situations that they're in before an eviction. And then our transitional living program is 4 units. I talked a little bit about this already, so I won't be redundant there. But again, this is really an independent program. We do an equity builder, which is always sort of a fun part of this program to tell. But similarly, it's full-time schooling and or employment. And when there is an income affiliated with the tenant, we ask that they pay 30% of that towards rent. We set 15% of that aside in a savings account. And when the youth moves out, they are able to take that without strings attached and pay a security deposit. We've had a youth purchase a vehicle, furniture, and other things. And so that's been a real incentive and a really great tool in terms of some financial literacy tools within that. And most of our young people are there for up to 2 years in that program. And let's see, what am I missing? We're piloting a youth and family coordinator position in Lincoln County specifically, and this was an invitation actually through Maine Health in Damascotta. And so this was a community health improvement project through the hospital, acknowledging the need around youth mental health access and housing insecurity. And so Maine Health covered the cost of a case manager to be embedded in Lincoln County and take referrals from the healthcare system and the community at large and try to do some troubleshooting. And that's starting to become some early planning around identifying the gaps in youth services in Lincoln County, which may or may not end up with some energy around a drop-in center or resource center. So, which would be great. It's early to know, but it was sort of a breakthrough on our part when it came to getting some healthcare dollars into the mix around youth access and services. And so that's been so far that's proving to be really positive. And I think that's what I've got.
Nice. Thank you for that great update, Molly. So I realize Midcoast Youth is on this call. I think they're still here, but I didn't reach out to you in advance. But Midcoast, if you'd like to speak to the housing programs that you run, love to hear about them. Donna, are you still on the call? She might have dropped off. And Danielle. Okay. All right. So I think we lost Midcoast Youth, but that's okay. They're still in the world doing good work, but they're not on the call anymore. So finally, Beverly from the statewide YAB has offered to speak about her personal experience in housing programs and offer some insights into the youth perspective on what folks who are offering housing programs should consider. So thank you, Beverly, for being willing to share your experience, and would love to hear from you.
Do you think I should post the questions in the chat?
I mean, you certainly can, but I think just speaking about your experience and whatever resonates with you is totally fine.
Okay. Let me do this for a second. Hello, everyone. My name is Beverly Hubbard. My pronouns are she, hers. I am the Maine Statewide Youth Action Board Specialist for New Beginnings. Oh no, I'm losing my train of thought. I would just like to say that also too, just in general, from a perspective of someone as a YAB member, housing in general, rent, there are just so many, there are sometimes so many barriers to somebody, especially if they're a young age. I know I had to experience homelessness at a very young age and dealing with being emancipated and many other things. And just in general, housing is such a tough issue when it comes down to it. I think, and if you really think about it, right, not one person can solve it. It takes a whole circle of people to solve this big issue. And there are so many pieces to it that we could sit down at a table and talk about it all we want, the issues when it comes to housing, but we really have to take into consideration that, wow, I really didn't think about this, that everyone's lived experience is completely different, and some people can speak about it, some people can't. Some YAB folks don't like talking about homelessness because there's such a stigma around it. And just in general, there are a lot of good people in the world that care about those young people, and sometimes they don't feel that way. I know from general experience, I didn't have the greatest relationships with a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I was the nicest person I could be. You're not going to have the best relationship with everybody, but at the end of the day, like every young person that you meet is going to remember you in some way, shape, or form, whether it's negative or positive. And housing for some people is hard to explain. It's hard to experience. And I know it took me a long time to get out of housing instability into stable housing. And sometimes it's harder said than done. And there's a lot of work to it. There's a lot of advocacy and work that goes into it, like certain things too. I know when I went to Washington, D.C. and advocated for certain things, it took a lot of, brain capacity to remember certain things. And be like, yeah, this is going on and we need help with this. And yeah, Susan Collins, nice to meet you. All it takes is communication and just in some sense, way, shape, or form supporting people. And I wouldn't be in the spot that I am today without the youth providers that believed in me and saw the passion that I had. I feel like I'm also going off on a tangent because I didn't really write down anything, but just in general, there is a lot of things going on too. I know me and the YAB created a presentation about the youth addendum. I did a bunch of like research and statistics on it to try and figure it out, just because like we can't resolve anything without knowing the background behind it and having some history to it too. And sometimes it's easier to have research to back up certain things than be like, yeah, no, I don't like this. Yeah. I don't know what else. I'll pass it back to you, Leah. But thank you
Beverly,
for letting
thank
me
you.
do my soapbox. That's kind of what it feels like sometimes when I talk too much.
I didn't feel like that was too much at all. I love your perspective and thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and your experience with us, Beverly, as always. We appreciate you so much. So everybody who's on this call in some capacity, works within the housing sphere. You can't address the problems of youth homelessness without also thinking about the problems and gaps and challenges and solutions with housing. So I guess a question that I would put out to the group is, what do you wish the larger community understood about the barriers for housing for youth in Maine? Like, we all are in this world. We all know this. But what do you think is a gap of knowledge or information that the larger community has around the struggles of housing for youth? Yeah, Deb.
I love how Deborah went first.
I think what I run into a lot is twofold. The first is people really don't understand the lack of resources that are out there for young people. Is everybody hearing me all right? Maybe not Denise, maybe everybody else. And then the other thing that I think people don't understand is, especially with minors, there's an assumption, I think, that DHHS will step in and solve all the problems that come up with young people, or if a young person doesn't have housing, that there's some sort of government body that will just step in and solve the problem and provide this young person with a stable place to be, when really there are so many hoops that DHHS has to jump through in order to take custody or to provide this young person with a safe place to be. There's a pretty high level of standard of evidence that DHHS has to gather in order to take a young person from a home, even if it isn't safe for that young person to be there. And so that young person might go somewhere else. There aren't actually that many supports for young people who are really struggling with substances, to be able to find peers who can help support them. A lot of the time they're compelled to seek out care for those, you know, or residential treatment or whatever, but maybe the young person is not at all bought into that as a possible solution for them, because it's not comfortable to be in that kind of a situation. They don't have any freedom. They don't feel like they have any choice. So it's not really that effective. So I think I see all three of those things happening pretty often. And I don't think that people really have a good understanding of the scope of how many young people we see who need support and stabilization and help from providers, and how few resources there are, and how difficult it can be for bodies that should have some authority over this space, that they really don't have as much as a lot of people think they do.
Yeah, Hannah.
I think more education on the housing first model. I think a lot of landlords and people in the community are like, why aren't these youth working? Or we need 3 times the rent at someone who's 18. They're trying to charge this and they don't have a cosigner. They're not understanding why there's no other supports in place to help them get this apartment. But I think there needs to be more education on like, how can a youth or how can anyone really be expected to get a job and do all these things when they're living outside or they're not meeting their basic needs every day. And that's something that I think is really good about our transitional living programs and the work that everyone's doing in the state is that people can move into these programs that we're the leaseholder of, and they don't have to go against that landlord and have that type of feud with them, and can really just settle in, save their money, and then they build up that skills and the money to be able to rent from an apartment. And it's a better selling point because they've already been in our program for a year. But I just wish that more landlords and people in the community were able to kind of view this population with a housing first lens.
Yes, Molly.
Thanks. I just figured out how to raise my hand on here. I agree with everything Hannah said, and this is sort of taking something that Deb started with and Hannah a step further. I agree that there seems to be this conception that there is always a solution when it comes to our young people, and maybe there should always be a solution, but I think the other piece that is sometimes dismissed is that there is not a full consideration for a young person's free will. And I think we have had many opportunities where we have built programs maybe with good intention, but they are not programs that sort of create that feeling of safety and security for our young people. And so, going back to the original commitments of this meeting, like really making sure that we are engaging these young voices to the extent possible, and still taking into consideration basic safety and legal necessities, but really building spaces that create a feeling of comfort for these young people, because otherwise, I mean, with such a with such a thin resource landscape, what we shouldn't be doing is putting well-intended ideas out there that do not track for these young people. And then there oftentimes is sort of this byproduct of resistance and then legal system involvement. And I think that really creates obviously a lot more barriers in that process. So I think listening to young people and scaling based on what really creates safety and understanding that they, even if they don't have the same amount of legal free will as, legal adults do, that's still going to have a real impact on their ability to engage in programs in a way that is really helpful and effective for them. And Leah, if it's okay, can I take one more minute and then I will stop talking around just in terms of emergency shelter? I'll just say for anybody, and I think this is New Beginnings in particular and Preble Street with emergency shelter programs that accept ESHAP funds, and that is an ESHAP grant. There was a cohort of executive directors last session that were able to secure one-time funding to increase the shelter operation share of emergency shelter beds in this program. We are back again for permanent funding. And so right now we just have an LR in there, but we will continue to communicate out on this. We are working with Bernstein Schur again, and the hope is that coming out of this second session, we will see a permanent increase in the shelter operation share for ESHAP. And so for anybody that's affected, keep the communication flowing around that, but we have good indication that some way, even if maybe there's a combination of approach, Drew Gatine has the bill in, and we'll be working closely with him to try to get that to the finish line, even though the funding is minimal at best. But especially with some of this permanent supportive pieces coming out, the more we can broadcast the need to not compromise the operating shelters that we have right now is really helpful. So just throwing that pitch out there to you all.
Nice. Thank you so much, Molly. And please feel free to send information along to the listserv. Actually, you could just send it to me and Allison, and we can send it out to the listserv. But we want to keep folks in the know and active with the with what's happening in the legislature between these meetings. So thank you for your work with that. Okay, I see Denise's hand.
Just talking about the community here in Lewiston. For me, I would love some understanding from our local police department, fire department. You know, we have a lot of interaction with them. Our kids set off fire alarm. You know, they get themselves in some trouble with the local police, and you know, I would love some understanding from those partners about, like, we are providing them a service, and without us, things would be much worse for these young people, you know. And a lot of times our interactions, you know, have not been great because they get frustrated with our kids coming to the buildings often. Both fire and police. So I would like more sort of understanding from them of, like, we are doing what we can do for these kiddos. And, you know, I understand that it's frustrating at times, but I feel like we provide a good service, and without us, their jobs would be much more difficult, you know, and that's kind of what I would like to see.
So there have been a lot of interesting things that have come up in response to that question. And I guess I'm curious, are there organizations or providers here who are feeling like you're making some inroads in dealing with some of these challenges and dealing with some of these barriers to understanding from the larger community? So, you know, we heard about challenges with landlord education. You know, we talked about honoring a young person's free will and listening to what they want and scaling and designing programs based on that. We talked about working more collaboratively with local law enforcement. Does anybody feel like they have anything to share with the group about ways that maybe they have made some inroads on addressing those gaps within your own program? Jess, yeah.
I know that here we have had some community meetings in some of the towns with the police departments and things like that, just to let them know what we can do and what we're capable of, and if they are seeing things, to reach out to us so that we can help out and what our limitations are. It's been very helpful. We have also had a couple of Zoom calls with a bunch of different people in the county, just to kind of let them know what our services are, so that when they are seeing youth that may be homeless or things like that, that they can reach out. So we have a pretty good working relationship with the police departments. Does it work 100% of the time? No, but I don't know of anything really that does, but it has helped. At least there's usually somebody that we can go back to and talk about, you know, how we've had these conversations before, and they can talk with their department there, to help, again, what our limitations are and expectations as well.
Denise, I see that your hand is up. I don't know if that was still up from before.
Yes, I'm all set.
Okay. Kirsten, yes.
Yeah, I think similarly to Jess, we've done a lot of work with our, and it's taken a lot of time, but I think as an agency, being such a presence in Portland has led to really needing to lean on making sure that our local law enforcement and behavioral health units and all of those folks are like aware of and working alongside us, rather than kind of having that rub of services. And I think we still definitely have that sometimes, because, you know, there's many officers within the Portland Police Department. And so we do our best to get to know the community policing liaisons in our area, and really rely heavily on those relationships. And we, it's kind of a lot, but we've also made it a point to, like, at least once a year go to the Portland Police Department's like shift changes. That way the local officers who are like on our beat do see our faces and get familiar with who we are, so that when we're calling, they kind of know who we are, they know what we're doing. I think there's a lot of misinformation about the young people that we serve within the community. And so being able to break down those communication barriers and let the officers know that, like, you know, these kids are way more than the behavior they might be presenting to them with in a moment of crisis or in a moment of you know, whatever's happening. So I think that's been largely successful. I think one of the other things that we struggle with and our work every day to communicate with our neighbors and to help be good neighbors to the buildings around us, the local businesses, and make sure that they, you know, similarly know what we're doing and who the youth are that we're serving, so that when they do see folks in crisis or struggling, that they're more likely to call us than they are to call the police or other emergency services, and see if we can support in de-escalating the conflict or the emergency before police involvement has to happen. If that all makes sense. Yeah.
You made a lot of wonderful points too.
So thinking about youth choice, I mean, this group represents programs from all over Maine, right? And I know that probably many of the programs that we work with serve many of the same young people who are traveling throughout the state. And so is there any more or better work that can be done for us to collaborate with each other to ensure that young people are able to be housed within the housing programs that work for them, and that are in their community of choice? I know that there's already a lot of collaboration that happens, but, you know, in the few minutes that we have left, are there any thoughts on ways to widen that collaboration? Does anybody have any examples of times that you've collaborated with another housing program in the state to ensure that a young person is housed in a way that makes sense for them in the space that they want to be in?
Hi, so this is Sasha Anastasiov with the Auburn School Department. So I've done some work with housing resources for youth out of Brunswick, and we actually were able, through the city, to pull their program into Auburn last school year and the year before that. And unfortunately, they decided to pull back from providing services in Auburn this year and went back to just focusing primarily in the Bath Brunswick area. So we had that resource for a very short period of time. It was, and the access to it was fairly limited because it was difficult to find families in the community that were willing to be host families. But I did have 2 host families, and I have 1 student who actively is still in that household, despite the program dissipating in Auburn. They chose to stay on and keep that youth with them. It was great while we had it.
Nice. And Donna, is that a new hand up or the old one? Oh, sorry, Denise. No, okay. And then Molly, I saw you come off mute. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
That's okay. I was just going to offer top of mind, because we were talking a little bit about coming together from shelter programs perspectives, and it was a really interesting experience last session, realizing that we all operate very differently in terms of our funding stacks and all of these other pieces, which I think is probably true in this group also, but we share challenges. And so I think that was a really good opportunity to find and cultivate new relationships, which I've also found has been able to create new introductions of program team members and be able to lean in a little bit. And so, I mean, I think that this group is an example of that has been doing this for a while, but just underscoring that it can be really valuable, even if we don't come up with like concrete programs or next steps, to be able to lean in to one another during these moments of real challenge. And so in our case, it was sort of all around this common cause of like, let's get more funding collectively. And it just underscored maybe what was even more important than the funding in that effort was the connections that it created around, a shared objective across the state around securing our shelters. So, and with that, I have to run to board meetings. So thank you. And sorry to jump off in the last couple minutes here.
Thanks for your participation, Molly. Appreciate it. And that said, we are actually at the end of our time together. Just really want to express gratitude to all of you for participating in this robust conversation. Despite all the bad news that we started the meeting with, I'm leaving this time with some hope about all the work that's happening across the state. So thank you all. Our next meeting and our last meeting of 2025 is December 9th, which I think is a little early. We wanted to keep it a little bit away from the holiday chaos. But our next meeting, our plan is to spend part of the time talking about youth coordinated entry, maybe hearing from some hub coordinators, and then spending some time doing some reflection on year end and looking forward to 2026. So hope to see you all there. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.